My name is Frank Doyle. I'm 62 years old, and for the last 31 years I've run Doyle Furniture, a company my own father started with 2 workbenches and a bank loan he almost couldn't pay back. I built it into something bigger than he ever dreamed. 3 plants, 200 employees, a name people in this state actually trust. None of that mattered on the Sunday my phone rang at 6:45 in the morning. I was standing at my kitchen counter, coffee halfway made, still in my robe. The number on the screen wasn't saved. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something told me to answer it. Mr. Doyle? This is Melissa Ortiz. I was the photographer at your daughter's wedding yesterday. Her voice was tight, careful, not the same warm, easy tone she'd used the day before while she was posing us on the lawn behind the reception hall. Everything all right? I asked. I need to talk to you. In person if you can. This morning, if possible. A pause. Please don't mention this to your daughter yet. That last sentence sat in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. What's this about, Melissa? I was going through the raw files last night, editing background shots. There's something in a few of the photos I think you need to see before anyone else does. Another pause, longer this time. I don't think it's my place to explain it over the phone. I told her I'd come. She gave me an address downtown, her studio above an old print shop on 5th Street, and she thanked me twice before hanging up. The same way people thank you right, before they tell you something that's going to ruin your morning. I stood there holding my phone, the coffee maker still gurgling behind me, and looked out the window at my backyard. The wedding tent was still up, folding chairs stacked against the fence, string lights hanging dead and unlit in the July sun. Yesterday, my daughter Rachel had married a good man, or at least a man I believed was good. Derek Hensley, works in commercial real estate. Polite, sharp, always shook my hand a little too firm, like he was trying to prove something. On my kitchen table sat a framed photo I hadn't put away yet. Rachel in her dress, laughing, her arm looped through mine as I walked her down the aisle. I picked it up and looked at it for a long moment before setting it back down, face up, like I needed it watching me. My wife Carol had passed 4 years earlier. Rachel was all the family I had left that mattered, and my son Nathan. Though lately Nathan and I hadn't been speaking the way father and son should, I got dressed without waking anyone. My house was quiet. Rachel and Derek were already on their way to the airport for their honeymoon, a trip to Portugal I'd paid for as a wedding gift. Nathan had stayed at a hotel the night before, instead of coming home, which wasn't unusual anymore. He ran the sales division of Doyle Furniture, had for 6 years, and lately every conversation we had ended shorter than it should have. The drive downtown took 18 minutes. Sunday morning traffic, empty streets, church bells somewhere in the distance. I found street parking outside a narrow brick building with Melissa's name stenciled in gold on the 2nd floor window. She met me at the top of the stairs. Younger than I remembered from the wedding, maybe 30, with dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept. Thank you for coming, Mr. Doyle. She locked the door behind me, which I noticed but didn't comment on. Come on back. Her studio smelled like coffee and hot electronics. Prints of other people's weddings lined the walls. Smiling brides, dancing couples, none of it doing anything to calm the tightening feeling in my stomach. She sat down at a wide monitor, gestured for me to take the chair beside her. I want to be clear, she said. I wasn't looking for anything. I shoot 200, sometimes 300 frames an hour at these events. Most of it's unusable. Bad angles, people mid-blink, background clutter. I go through everything the next morning to sort the keepers. Melissa, I said, just show me. She clicked into a folder time-stamped from the reception, somewhere around 8:30, when the dance floor had filled up, and most of the guests had a drink in hand. The first few photos were exactly what I expected. Rachel and Derek's first dance. Guests laughing at the bar. Nothing wrong with any of it. These are the ones you'll get in your final gallery, she said. But there's a camera I keep running on a tripod near the side entrance the whole night, just picking up candid background shots for the album filler. Nobody notices it. I went through that footage last night. She clicked forward. The image that loaded showed the side hallway outside the reception hall, the one that led out to the parking lot. 2 men stood close together, half in shadow, clearly not wanting to be seen. One of them was my son, Nathan, still in his suit from the ceremony. The other man I recognized immediately, and my hand went cold around the arm of the chair. Gerald Pruitt, CEO of Ashcombe Furnishings. my biggest competitor, a man who had spent the last 3 years trying to buy Doyle Furniture out from under me and who I had personally, publicly, turned down twice. "Keep going," I said, my voice not sounding like my own. Melissa clicked to the next frame. Nathan was handing Gerald a folded envelope. In the one after that, they were shaking hands, and Gerald was smiling in a way that made my stomach drop straight through the floor. "There's more," Melissa said quietly. I zoomed in on one of the frames. "I think you should look closely at what's in his other hand." She pulled the image up full screen and zoomed into Nathan's left hand, half hidden at his side, a folder. Manila, thick with paper, the Doyle Furniture logo printed clearly across the top corner. "Those are internal documents," I said, almost to myself. "That's our logo. Those are company files." "I didn't know what I was looking at until I saw the logo blown up," Melissa said. "I almost didn't call you. But it's your daughter's wedding day in these photos. Your son and your competitor meeting in private, exchanging what looks like money and company paperwork. I didn't think that was something you should find out about from someone else." I sat back in the chair, staring at my own son's face frozen mid-handshake, with the one man I trusted least in this entire industry. At my daughter's wedding, 20 feet from where I'd been giving a toast an hour earlier about family being the only thing that really lasts. "Can you send me these?" I said. "All of them. Full resolution. Already on a drive for you." She held it out, her hand not quite steady. "Mr. Doyle, I have to ask. Do you know what this could be about?" I thought about the board meeting 6 weeks earlier, where Nathan had pushed harder than I'd ever seen him push for me to consider Ashcombe's latest buyout offer. I thought about the way he'd gone quiet for the rest of that meeting when I refused outright. I thought about how often lately he found reasons to be anywhere but in the same room as me. "I have an idea," I said. "I don't like it." I took the flash drive and closed my fist around it, the same way you'd hold something you were afraid to look at too closely, but couldn't make yourself put down. "Thank you for calling me," I told her. "You did the right thing." "I hope so," she said. "I really do." The drive home felt longer than the drive there. I kept the radio off. My hand stayed steady on the wheel, but my mind wasn't steady at all. 31 years I had spent building that company. Every late night, every risk. Every year I chose the business over almost everything else, including, if I was honest with myself, some of the time I should have spent with my own kids. And now my son was in a photograph at his sister's wedding, handing company documents to the one man on earth who wanted to tear that company apart and sell off the pieces. I pulled into my driveway and sat there with the engine off for a long time, the flash drive resting on the passenger seat like it was radioactive. Through my windshield I could see the wedding tent still standing in the backyard, chairs still arranged in rows, the whole scene frozen exactly as we'd left it the night before, like nothing had happened yet. But something had happened. I just hadn't understood what it meant until this morning. I thought about calling Nathan right then, hearing his voice, asking him straight out what I'd seen in those photographs. Instead, I sat in my truck in my own driveway, staring at that tent, and I made a different decision. I wasn't going to ask him anything yet. I was going to find out exactly what my son had already done, and exactly how far it went, before I gave him a single chance to explain it away. Monday morning I went into the office like nothing had changed, because that's exactly what I needed everyone to believe, including Nathan. Doyle Furniture's main plant sits on the edge of town, a low brick building with our name in block letters above the entrance, the same sign that's been there since I was younger than Nathan is now. I parked in my usual spot, walked past the floor where 40 men and women were already running the morning line, and went straight to my office without stopping to talk to anyone, which wasn't like me. My assistant, Donna, has worked for me for 18 years. She knows my moods better than my own children do. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said, setting a coffee on my desk. "Long weekend," I told her. "Get me an hour with Ellen this afternoon. Just her and me, nothing on the calendar." Ellen Marsh runs our legal and compliance department. She's sharp, careful, and doesn't repeat things she isn't supposed to. Donna raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. That's part of why I trust her. I closed my office door and pulled up the flash drive on my computer, going through Melissa's photographs one more time in the quiet, studying every detail I'd missed the first time out of pure shock. Nathan's hand extending the folder, Gerald Pruitt's smile, the kind of smile a man wears when he already knows he's won something. The Doyle Furniture logo, clear as day, printed across the top of the documents changing hands. I thought back to a dinner 3 months earlier, the four of us. Me, Nathan, Rachel, and Derek, who'd just gotten engaged. Nathan had barely touched his food that night. I remembered asking him if something was wrong at the plant. "Just tired of fighting the same battles every quarter, Dad," he'd said. "Maybe it's time we thought bigger. Maybe it's time we let someone else worry about competing." I'd laughed it off then, told him Doyle Furniture wasn't for sale, not while I was breathing, and that had been the end of the conversation. Looking back now, it hadn't felt like the end of anything. It had felt like the opening move. Rachel had noticed something too, actually. She'd pulled me aside in the kitchen while Nathan and Derek talked business in the other room. "He's different lately," she'd said. "Distant. I think something's bothering him, Dad. Maybe you should talk to him." I hadn't. I'd been too busy running 3 plants and planning her wedding to sit my son down and ask what was actually going on in his head. That guilt sat heavy in my chest now, next to the anger, next to the disbelief. Ellen came into my office a little after 2 that afternoon, closing the door behind her without being asked. "Frank, you look terrible," she said. "What's going on?" I turned my monitor toward her and let her look at the photographs without saying anything. I watched her face change the way mine must have changed in Melissa's studio. "That's Gerald Pruitt," she said slowly. "You know who it is. And that's company paperwork Nathan's handing him at Rachel's wedding." She sat down across from me, her voice dropping. "Frank, do you know what documents those are?" "Not yet. That's what I need you to find out." Quietly. "I don't want this going through the normal channels yet. I don't want anyone in this building knowing we're looking, especially not Nathan." Ellen was quiet for a moment, turning something over in her mind the way she does before she says something she knows I won't like. "If Nathan's been sharing internal documents with Ashcombe, that's not just a family problem," she said. "That's corporate espionage. That's a federal issue if it involves trade secrets, pricing models, client contracts. I need you to understand what you might be looking at before we go digging." "I understand it," I said. "I still need to know." She nodded slowly. "Give me 48 hours. I'll pull access logs quietly, see what's been touched, downloaded, printed. If something's missing, we'll know exactly what he took." After she left, I walked the production floor the way I used to every single day, back before the business got big enough that I could afford to stop doing it. I watched Marcus, who's run our finishing line for 22 years, teaching a new hire how to check a joint for the 3rd time that week. I watched 2 women on the upholstery line, laughing over something on someone's phone. This was still my company, still my people. Still my father's name on that sign outside, no matter what my own son might have decided it was worth to somebody else. Nathan's office was down the executive hallway from mine, door open like always. I stopped in the doorway without meaning to. "Dad." He looked up from his monitor, surprised. "Thought you were taking the week easy after the wedding. Just checking on things," I said. "How was Sunday? You left early." "Had some calls to catch up on," he said too quickly, his eyes going back to his screen instead of staying on mine. "You know how it gets." "Sure," I said. "You feeling all right, Nathan? You've seemed off lately." He looked up at that, something flickering across his face I couldn't quite name. Guilt, maybe, or fear that I already knew more than I was letting on. "I'm fine, Dad. Just a lot on my plate." I nodded and walked away before he could see whatever was showing on my own face. I wasn't ready yet. Not until Ellen had something solid, not until I understood exactly how deep this went. That night I sat alone at my kitchen table with a glass of bourbon I barely touched. The same table where Carol and I used to sit and talk through every decision that mattered in our lives. Buying the 2nd plant, sending Nathan to business school, walking Rachel down the aisle 2 days earlier. I wished more than anything she was sitting across from me now, telling me what to do with what I'd learned. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel, a photo from the airport, her and Derek grinning in front of a departures board, Lisbon written above their gate number. "Thank you for everything, Dad. Best wedding we could have asked for. Love you." I stared at that message for a long time before I typed back a simple "love you too." "Have a wonderful trip," deleting 3 other drafts that said too much, that came too close to telling her what her own brother had been doing 20 feet from her wedding reception. She didn't need to know. Not yet. Not until I knew myself. 2 days later, Ellen came back to my office and closed the door the way she had before, except this time she didn't sit down right away. She just stood there with a folder in her hand, and I could tell from her face that whatever she'd found was worse than either of us had hoped. "Frank," she said, "you need to sit down for this. I'm already sitting. Then you need to brace yourself instead." She set the folder on my desk and opened it. Nathan's accessed our full client contract database 4 times in the last 2 months. Pricing structures for our top 12 accounts. Our 5-year expansion plan for the new distribution center. And 2 weeks ago, he downloaded our entire supplier cost sheet. The numbers that let Ashcombe undercut every bid we make for the next fiscal year if they have them. I felt something in my chest go still and cold. "He's been planning this for months," I said. Not a question, a fact settling into place. "There's something else." Ellen's voice dropped lower. "I found an email thread, deleted account, but he was able to recover fragments of it. Frank, Gerald Pruitt isn't just trying to buy the company anymore. Based on what I'm seeing here, I think Nathan's been negotiating to sell him controlling interest directly, behind your back, and behind the board's back too." "Controlling interest," I repeated. "He doesn't have the authority to sell anything. I hold 60% of this company. He's not selling his shares, Frank." Ellen looked at me steadily, letting the weight of what she was about to say land fully before she said it. "I think he's found a way to convince 3 of our minority board members to sell theirs. If he gets them on his side, combined with his own 10%, Ashcombe could end up with enough leverage to force you into a vote you can't win outright, even holding a majority stake yourself." I sat back in my chair, the office around me suddenly feeling too small, too quiet. My own son wasn't just handing over documents at his sister's wedding. He was engineering a hostile takeover of the company my father built, 1 board member at a time, and he'd been doing it in complete silence, while sitting across from me at Sunday dinners, while standing beside me at Rachel's wedding, while looking me in the eye 2 days ago and telling me he was fine. I didn't sleep that night, or the one after it. I kept replaying every conversation with Nathan over the last year, searching for the moment I should have seen this coming and hadn't. Ellen and I spent the better part of a week working quietly, after hours, going through everything the recovered emails pointed us toward. What we found didn't make anything easier. 3 board members, Harold Voss, Diane Kessler, and my old college friend Walt Bryant, a man I'd trusted with a seat on my board for 15 years, had all been in private contact with Ashcombe's legal team. Nathan had set up the introductions himself. "Walt," I said out loud, staring at the printed email thread on my desk. 30 years I've known that man." "People change when there's enough money on the table," Ellen said. "Or maybe he was always waiting for a reason." The offer Ashcombe had put together was thorough, a per-share buyout well above market value, structured specifically to be attractive enough that 3 minority holders, combined with Nathan's stake, could outvote me at a special board session. Even without touching my majority ownership directly, it was legal, ruthless, calculated, and completely legal, which somehow made it worse. "There's a board meeting scheduled for 3 weeks from now," Ellen said. "Quarterly review. If they're going to make a move, that's when they'll try. Then we have 3 weeks," I said, "to figure out how to stop it." I hadn't told Rachel anything. She and Derek were still in Portugal, sending me photos of stone streets and ocean views, completely unaware that her brother had spent her wedding day laying the groundwork to take apart everything our family had built. I didn't want to ruin her honeymoon with something I still didn't fully understand myself, but keeping quiet was starting to eat at me in a way I hadn't expected. I found myself standing in Nathan's old childhood bedroom one evening, looking at trophies from a little league team I used to coach, at a photo on his dresser of the 2 of us at his college graduation, both of us grinning like nothing could ever come between us. My phone rang. "Nathan." "Hey Dad, you free tonight? Thought I'd stop by." Every instinct told me to say no, to buy myself more time. Instead, I said, "Sure, come on over." He arrived a little after 7, still in his work clothes, tie loosened, looking tired in a way that had nothing to do with hours worked. We sat on the porch the way we used to when he was younger, back before the company got big enough to come between us at every family dinner. "How's Rachel and Derek doing?" he asked. "Good. Loving Portugal from the sound of it." I studied his face in the porch light. "Nathan, is everything okay with you? You've seemed distant for a while now." Longer than a while, honestly. He looked down at his hands. Work's been a lot, Dad. The market's shifting. Ashcombe's been undercutting us on 3 of our biggest accounts this quarter. I don't think we can keep competing the way we have been. So what would you have us do instead? Maybe it's time to think about a different path, he said carefully, like he'd rehearsed the words. A partnership. A merger. Something that lets the company survive without you and me working ourselves into the ground fighting battles we're not winning anymore. There it was. Not a confession, not yet, but the opening he'd been building toward. The company's fine, Nathan, I said, keeping my voice even. We've weathered worse than a competitor undercutting a few accounts. Have we? Something sharp crept into his voice for the first time. Dad, you're 62. I've been running sales for 6 years and you still make every major decision like I'm 25 and just started. When do I actually get a say in where this company goes? There it was. Some truth buried under all the rest of it, the kind of resentment that doesn't come from nowhere. You have a say, I said. You've always had a say, do I? Because every time I've suggested we consider outside investment, consider a partnership that would actually let us compete at scale, you shut it down in about 30 seconds. You don't listen, Dad. You just decide, and I'm supposed to fall in line because it's your name on the building. I sat with that for a moment, feeling the anger and the guilt tangle together in my chest, because some of what he was saying wasn't entirely wrong, even if it didn't excuse a single thing he'd done. So instead of talking to me, I said slowly, you decided to go around me instead. His face changed instantly, careful, guarded. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know about the documents, Nathan. I know about Gerald Pruitt. I know about Walt and Harold and Diane. The color drained out of his face. For a long moment, neither of us said anything, the only sound the crickets, starting up in the yard and a car passing somewhere down the street. Dad, at Rachel's wedding, I said, my voice finally breaking the way I'd been holding it together for over a week. You handed him company files at your sister's wedding, Nathan. While I was standing 40 feet away, giving a toast about family being the only thing that lasts. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. I stood up, unable to sit still with the anger finally boiling over. Tell me why my son is quietly convincing 3 board members to sell out from under me. Tell me why our entire pricing structure and 5-year expansion plan ended up in the hands of the one man who spent 3 years trying to tear this company apart. Nathan stood too, his jaw tight, some mixture of shame and defiance in his face I'd never seen directed at me before. Because you were never going to say yes on your own, he said. You've turned Gerald down twice already. You'll turn him down forever, even if it means running this company into the ground out of pure stubbornness. Someone had to actually think about what happens after you're gone, Dad. Someone had to think about the future by selling my father's company behind my back, by making sure there's still a company left to sell in 10 years. His voice cracked, loud enough that a neighbor's porch light flicked on down the street. You think Doyle Furniture survives another decade the way you're running it? Ashcombe's eating our lunch on price. Our equipment's a decade behind theirs. You won't invest in automation. You won't consider new markets. You won't listen to a single piece of advice I bring you, unless it's exactly what you already wanted to hear. So you decided to sell me out instead of fighting for it. I decided to build something that actually survives, he shot back. Even if it means doing it without you holding the wheel. The words hit harder than anything else he'd said, because underneath the anger in his voice, I could hear that he meant every word of it. Get off my porch, Nathan, Dad. Get off my porch, I said again, quieter this time, which somehow felt worse than shouting it. We'll discuss this properly with Ellen and legal counsel present. Until then, I don't want to hear another word from you that isn't through them. He stood there a moment longer, like he wanted to say something else, then turned and walked to his car without looking back. I watched his headlights swing out of my driveway and disappear down the street, and I stood alone on that porch for a long time afterward, the crickets loud in the silence he'd left behind. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text, not from Nathan. It was from Ellen, sent at 9:47 p.m. 3 words that made my stomach drop even further than it already had that night. Call me. Now I called her immediately, my hand not quite steady on the phone. Ellen, what is it? Her voice was tight, careful in a way I'd never heard from her before, Frank, I just got off the phone with a contact I have inside Ashcomb's legal department. Someone who owes me a favor from years back. A pause, like she was bracing herself as much as me. The board meeting isn't 3 weeks away anymore. Gerald moved it up. They filed an emergency special session request this afternoon. When? I said, though some part of me already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. Friday morning, Ellen said. Frank, they're not waiting anymore. Whatever we're going to do, we have 4 days to do it. 4 days. I sat at my desk until nearly midnight that night with Ellen on speakerphone, going through our bylaws page by page, looking for anything that could slow down a vote called with almost no warning. There's a supermajority clause, Ellen said, her voice tired but focused, buried in the original charter your father wrote. Any sale of controlling interest or any structural change to ownership requires a 75% approval, not a simple majority. Nathan and the 3 board members combined only get Ashcombe to 68%, even in the best case for them. Then why move up the meeting at all? Because Gerald's lawyers think they can convince you to abstain, or convince enough shareholders that resisting isn't worth the fight, Ellen said. Frank, this only works if you show up Friday and fight it publicly, in front of the full board. If you don't show, or if you're too rattled to make your case clearly, they win by default. I hung up a little after midnight and sat alone in my office, the framed photo of Rachel's wedding still sitting on the corner of my desk where I hadn't been able to put it away. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel, still in Portugal, 3 days left on her honeymoon. Everything okay, Dad? You've seemed weird in your last few texts. I typed back a lie, told her everything was fine, then sat there staring at it before I finally deleted it and wrote the truth instead, or at least part of it. Something's happened at the company involving your brother. I don't want to ruin your trip. Come home when you plan to. We'll talk then. Her response came almost instantly. We're changing our flight. Home tomorrow night. I picked Rachel and Derek up myself the next evening, and I told her everything on the drive home. Melissa's phone call, the photographs, the board members, the emergency meeting Friday morning. She sat in the passenger seat in complete silence for most of it, her hands folded tight in her lap until I finished. He did this at my wedding, she said finally, her voice flat with disbelief. While I was inside dancing with my husband, my own brother was selling out our family's company 20 feet away. I know. Does he even understand what Grandpa built? What you've spent your entire life building? I don't think he sees it that way anymore, I said. I think somewhere along the line, he stopped seeing himself as part of it and started seeing it as something standing between him and whatever he actually wants. Rachel was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. I need to talk to him, she said finally. Before Friday, I didn't go with her. This needed to happen between the two of them, and honestly, I wasn't sure I trusted myself to sit in a room with my son again without saying something I couldn't take back. She called me that night, a little past 10, her voice shaking in a way I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. Dad, there's something you need to know before Friday. Something Nathan told me tonight. What is it? Gerald Pruitt didn't just offer him a business deal, Rachel said. He had something on him. 6 months ago, Nathan was involved with someone, not Emily, someone else, while they were still together. Gerald found out somehow. He's had photos, texts, everything for months. He told Nathan that if he didn't cooperate, help move the board vote, hand over what Ashcombe needed, he'd send everything straight to Emily and post enough of it publicly to make sure Nathan's reputation in this industry was finished. I sat down slowly on the edge of my bed, the anger in my chest shifting into something more complicated. Not gone, not even close to gone, but complicated. He's been blackmailing him, I said. For months, Dad. Nathan said he tried to find a way out of it without involving you, without it becoming a whole thing. Then it just kept getting worse. More documents, more demands. He said that once he handed over the first file, Gerald had leverage on that too, and it just kept snowballing until he didn't see a way out anymore. I thought about all the missed dinners, the distant conversations, the moment on my porch 3 nights earlier when he'd looked more scared than defiant underneath all that anger. That doesn't excuse what he did, I said. I know, Rachel said quietly. I told him that too. But Dad, I think he needs help getting out of this, not just punishment for getting into it. And I think if we play this right, Gerald's blackmail is exactly what takes him down on Friday, not just us. Ellen listened to everything the next morning, without interrupting once, taking notes the entire time, her expression shifting from grim to something almost sharp with focus by the time Rachel finished explaining what Nathan had told her. "If Nathan's willing to put this in writing," Ellen said finally, "willing to testify that Gerald Pruitt coerced him into corporate espionage through blackmail, that changes everything. That's not just a family betrayal anymore. That's criminal coercion on Ashcomb's side. That's the kind of thing that ends careers and opens federal investigations." "Will he do it?" I asked. "Put it in writing?" "I already asked him," Rachel said. "He said yes. Dad, I think some part of him wanted a way out of this the whole time. He just didn't think there was one. I called Nathan that evening for the first time since I'd told him to get off my porch. He answered on the second ring, his voice quiet, careful, like he wasn't sure what kind of conversation he was about to be in. "Dad, Rachel told me everything," I said. "About Gerald. About what he's been holding over you." Silence on the line for a long moment. "I should have come to you the first time he threatened me," Nathan said finally. "I was ashamed. I thought I could handle it myself, keep it contained, and then it just kept growing until I didn't know how to stop it without everything blowing up anyway. It's blowing up either way now," I said. "The only question left is which direction it blows. What do you need me to do?" "Come to the meeting Friday," I said. "Sit across from Gerald Pruitt and tell the board exactly what he did to force your hand. Every bit of it, on the record." Another pause. "And after that?" I thought about the porch, about the anger still sitting heavy in my chest, about 31 years of building something my son had nearly handed away in pieces to a man who'd been threatening him in the dark the entire time. "After that," I said, "you and I are going to have a much longer conversation about trust and about what it's going to take to earn mine back. We handle Gerald first, family comes after." "Okay," Nathan said, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, he sounded like my son again instead of a stranger wearing his face. "Okay, Dad, I'll be there." I hung up the phone and sat alone in my kitchen, the framed wedding photo still sitting on the counter where I'd left it days earlier, Rachel's laughing face frozen in a moment none of us had understood the full weight of yet. Friday morning, I would walk into that boardroom and face Gerald Pruitt across the same table where my father once sat. I didn't know yet exactly how the vote would go, or whether 31 years of work could survive one desperate son and one ruthless competitor working together in the shadows. But for the first time since Melissa Ortiz called me at 6:45 on a Sunday morning, I finally had something I hadn't had all week, a plan, and my son standing beside me instead of against me. The boardroom at Doyle Furniture hasn't changed much since my father used to run meetings at that same long oak table, same view of the plant floor through the windows along the east wall, same brass plaque by the door with his name on it, the man who started this whole thing with 2 workbenches and a loan he was terrified he couldn't repay. I got there 40 minutes early. Ellen was already waiting, folders organized in front of her seat, her expression calm in the way people get right before something important, not because they're not nervous, but because they've decided nerves aren't going to be the thing that stops them. "You ready for this?" she asked. "No," I said honestly, "but we're doing it anyway." Nathan arrived next in a suit instead of his usual office clothes, looking like he hadn't slept much better than I had all week. He sat down beside me without a word, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, that felt like exactly where he belonged. Rachel came too, though she wasn't a board member. I'd asked her to sit in the back, and she'd insisted on being there no matter what I said about it. Walt Bryant arrived at 8:55, avoiding my eyes as he took his seat. Harold Voss and Diane Kessler came in together, murmuring to each other, going quiet the moment they noticed me watching them. And at 9 o'clock exactly, Gerald Pruitt walked in with 2 lawyers behind him, wearing the same confident smile from the photograph Melissa had shown me, like he already knew how this morning was going to end. He didn't know yet that I did too. "Frank," he said, extending a hand I didn't take. "Good to see you looking well, given the circumstances." "Sit down, Gerald," I said. "Let's get started." The chairman of our board, a longtime friend named Douglas Metz, opened the emergency session by reading the proposal on the table. A buyout structured to secure controlling interest in Doyle Furniture through the combined shares of Nathan Doyle, Harold Voss, Diane Kessler, and Walt Bryant, pending board approval. "Before we vote," I said, standing up before Douglas could move to the floor. "I'd like the board to hear something first." Gerald's smile flickered just slightly. "Frank, this is a straightforward vote. I don't see the need for." "You will," I said, "in about 2 minutes." I nodded to Nathan. He stood, his hands steady despite everything, and looked directly at Gerald Pruitt for the first time since he'd walked into the room. 6 months ago," Nathan said, "Gerald Pruitt approached me privately with photographs and private messages he'd obtained showing an affair I'd had before my ex-fiancée and I separated. He threatened to send everything to her, and to make sure it became public within this industry, unless I provided him with internal Doyle Furniture documents and helped arrange private introductions between his legal team and 3 of our board members." The room went completely silent. Diane Kessler's face went pale. Harold Voss stared down at the table like he was trying to disappear into it. "That's a serious accusation," one of Gerald's lawyers said quickly. With documentation," Ellen said, sliding a folder down the table. "Text message records, email threads, a sworn written statement from Nathan Doyle, notarized yesterday afternoon, detailing every instance of coercion, along with timestamps matching the exact dates internal company files were accessed and transmitted." Gerald's expression had stopped being confident somewhere in the last 30 seconds. "This is corporate coercion," Ellen continued, her voice calm and absolutely unshakable. "Blackmail used to extract trade secrets and manipulate a board vote. That's not a business dispute anymore, Gerald. That's criminal conduct, and we've already been in contact with the district attorney's office this week." "Frank," Gerald said, turning to me, his voice losing its polish for the first time since I'd known him, "let's be reasonable. Whatever your son did, that was his decision. You blackmailed my son," I said, "to steal from my company, using photographs of a personal mistake that had nothing to do with any of you. And you did it while smiling at my daughter's wedding reception, 20 feet from where I was giving a toast." Nobody in that room said anything for a long moment. "Walt," I said, turning to the man who'd sat on my board for 15 years, who I'd trusted enough to invite into my own home more times than I could count. "Did you know about the blackmail?" Walt wouldn't meet my eyes. "No," he said quietly. "Gerald approached me with a buyout offer, a generous one. I didn't ask enough questions about how he'd gotten Nathan on board with it. That's on me." "It is," I said. "And it's going to cost you your seat on this board effective today." Douglas Metz cleared his throat. "Given what's been presented, I move that we table the buyout proposal indefinitely and refer the matter of Mr. Pruitt's conduct to legal counsel and appropriate authorities." The vote wasn't close. Gerald and his lawyers left the room within minutes. Gerald's face a shade of red I'd never seen on him before, muttering something about lawsuits that Ellen assured me, once they were gone, wouldn't survive contact with the evidence we had. Walt resigned formally by the end of the day. Harold Voss and Diane Kessler both stayed on, chastened, careful, having genuinely not known the full extent of what they'd been drawn into. I decided, after long consideration, that ignorance born of greed still deserved a second chance if it came with real accountability. They kept their seats. They also, from that day forward, asked a great many more questions before agreeing to anything. The company survived. Federal investigators did eventually open an inquiry into Ashcombe Furnishing's business practices, though Ellen tells me that's a slow process that could take years to fully resolve. Gerald Pruitt stepped down as CEO of Ashcombe 4 months later, quietly, with no public explanation offered, though I suspect a few people in this industry understand exactly why. Nathan and I didn't fix everything in one boardroom meeting. That would have been too easy, and honestly, too dishonest for either of us to believe. We had that longer conversation I'd promised him, sitting on the same porch where I'd told him to leave weeks earlier. He apologized in a way that didn't try to excuse what he'd done, just explained it honestly. The years of feeling like his ideas didn't matter, the shame of the blackmail eating at him, until it felt like the only way out was deeper in, the mistake of choosing silence over simply coming to me and saying he was in trouble. "I should have trusted you enough to tell you," he said. "Instead, I let it turn into something that almost cost us everything." "You should have," I agreed. "But I also should have listened more. All those years you tried telling me the company needed to change. I wasn't as open to hearing it as I told myself I was. We didn't fix 30 years of a complicated relationship in one conversation on a porch. But we started somewhere honest, which was more than we'd had in a long time. 6 months later, Nathan and I sat down together with Ellen and finally built the modernization plan he'd been trying to get me to consider for years. New equipment, a genuine push into 3 new regional markets, structural changes I'd been too stubborn to seriously entertain before. Not because Gerald Pruitt had been right about anything. He hadn't. But because somewhere in the middle of nearly losing everything, I'd finally started actually listening to my son instead of just hearing him. Rachel and Derek settled into married life a few miles from me, and most Sundays now, all 4 of us sit down together for dinner the way we used to before the company, before the distance, before any of this happened. Last week, Nathan brought a folder to dinner instead of leaving it at the office. New proposals, genuine ideas, the kind of work I could tell he was proud of again. I still have that framed photograph from Rachel's wedding on my kitchen counter. Sometimes I catch myself looking at it and thinking about how close we came to losing everything that mattered because 2 people who loved each other stopped talking long enough for the wrong man to walk right into the space between them. My father built this company with 2 workbenches and a loan he was terrified he couldn't repay. He used to tell me that a business is never really about the wood or the machines or even the money. It's about the people who show up every day and choose to build something together instead of tearing it apart. I nearly forgot that lesson somewhere along the way. It took almost losing my son and nearly losing everything my father built to remember it fully. We rebuilt. Slower this time, and a great deal more honestly than before. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, when I walk through that plant floor now, past the same brass plaque with my father's name on it, I don't just see a company anymore. I see a family that finally chose to stay in the room, instead of walking away from each other in silence. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from tonight? Thank you for watching.